And
Hello and welcome to Sales Leaders Institute. I'm Shelley Carney.
and I'm Toby Younis. Thanks for joining us tonight. We have a very special guest whom I'm going to introduce as soon as we finish this intro. So I'm about to introduce you to someone who I know really, really well. Full disclosure, the young lady that's to the left of us is Toby Renée Younis. She's the youngest of my 6 children, 4 of whom are in the high-tech industry. And I invited Toby here today because I realized that her generation has had the unique experience of having survived the period that started with the changes that resulted in 9/11, then what I'd call the Great Recession in the late 2000s, and now they're faced with another challenge. And what's impressed me about Toby and a lot of her friends, and the reason I know her friends is because I coached them on various soccer teams, has been how positive and how assertive and how hardworking they are. And I don't think that's necessarily the nature of this particular generation anymore than it has been in other generations. But this generation just keeps on trucking, and that's why I asked her to be with us today. I'm going to start with a little background. Toby was born in Chantilly, Virginia. She attended schools there, public schools, all the way through Chantilly High School. Then she went to Johnson and Wales University in Charlotte, North Carolina, where she graduated with a degree in culinary arts. She went into the culinary arts field and stayed there for a little while, but found herself working for a catering company in kind of the marketing and sales side and really had a passion for it. She went from there to marketing for the biggest hospital system in Northern Virginia, Nova Hospital System. And then she went to a high-tech company called Toby Pro. And she started there in marketing, but moved over into sales and has become, I feel like, based on what she tells me, one of their better sales professionals. So I'll let her tell you about that. So Toby, welcome, and thank you very much for agreeing to do this interview tonight.
Thank you for having me.
I'm glad that we could. So I'm gonna switch over to my screenshot, and it's actually the Toby Pro website. While I do that, why don't you tell us a little bit about your company, the company that you work for?
Okay. So Toby Pro is, like you mentioned, a high-tech technology company, but we specifically focus on hardware and software for eye tracking technology. And normally when I say that to people, they think Minority Report, but that's not typically what we're doing. That's not what we're doing at all, actually, is we're actually using eye tracking to research the user and see where their eyes are looking at a specific time, whether that's in diagnostic, scientific research, or marketing and user experience research, or human performance research.
And when you joined the company, you joined, if I remember correctly, the marketing organization. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah. I started as event marketing.
And then what caused you to decide to move over to the sales side?
Even the moment that I started at Toby Pro, my boss knew that I wanted to move into the sales side eventually. It happened much quicker than both of us expected, but it was the right move at the right time. And I think I've always wanted to be in sales. It kind of happened in my blood a little bit.
Mm-hmm, yeah. So you're all in the kind of the same. You're in the same position that many of us are. You're working from home. But let's go back before your work was affected by the pandemic, and tell me a little bit about your sales process. I know you do a lot of traveling. So what's it like selling for a company like Toby Pro, especially when you're expected to travel all over the world?
So Toby Pro is a global company, but we do handle just North America for our office in Reston, Virginia. I have had the pleasure of working on several different teams within the sales team. So I used to be more focused on the commercial side with the marketing research and user experience. And now I am focused on human performance, which kind of has upped my traveling a little bit more because now I'm actually taking care of all of North America, which also includes Canada. But I enjoy it. I've come to realize how special it is to travel, but also be home at the same time, and how to make those traveling days crammed in with as many meetings as possible so I can do just a quick 2-day trip and come home.
So a lot of people, as they get into the combination of traveling and high-tech sales, get a little bit burned out. Have you experienced any of that? What's it felt like so far?
No, fortunately I haven't, but that's also because we are a large global company, but we almost feel like a small startup. We've been around for almost 20 years now, but we still have that mentality. We are still growing, and I think this is probably because it's a technology company, is if we're not growing, we're not going to be selling. So there's always going to be a new technology that we're coming out with, and I think I also enjoy what I sell. I believe in what the product is, and I know some salespeople, that's not how they work, and they don't need that, but I certainly do, and I think it helps me push a little bit more, and that's probably why I haven't reached to that burnout point, because I'm always changing in my role too.
So, Shelley, I haven't quite figured out how to make the transition without us raising hands or something, so I'll just kind of take a break every once in a while and ask you if you had any additional questions for that.
Sure. So, Toby, let's hear a little bit about some of the transitions that you've made. You made a transition from the catering company to the hospital to Toby Pro. You've changed departments, you've changed jobs. Each time and within this particular job, I know that you've changed sales teams, you've changed what product you work with. So talk to us a little bit about how you get through those transitions. What helps you to get from where you start to where you're going, and to do that without a whole lot of stress and overwhelm?
Well, I think for me, I've always looked for the opportunity to move. So whether it was from the culinary world to the event planning world to the marketing world, I knew that from the very start, I kind of always been that person that I need to keep growing or I will get bored. So the longest company I've been with, which was the catering company, was 5 years. And I had kind of reached my point of I've grown enough here, I need to start moving on. So I think that I would like to say that it's luck, but I also think that I look for those opportunities, and I kind of jump on them. And that's just my personality too. And I think that's a lot of salespeople's personalities. They're hungry for more. And I think that's helped me make those jumps. And then the stress of it kind of makes me thrive also. Overcoming those challenges is just something that I'm kind of used to. And I always say that as a pastry chef, you kind of, and I know this is weird to like bring it back to my pastry world, but you come into so many things where you're crunched on time, or you don't have the tool, or you don't have the ingredient that you need, and you're always finding solutions for something. And so it's kind of brings me full circle to back to my pastry world. And that's kind of how I've continued my life with problem solving.
So tell me a little bit about where your offices are located now, where your corporate headquarters are, and a little bit about your current territory.
Okay. So our office is in Reston, Virginia. We're right outside of DC for those people that are not familiar with the East Coast. So we're about 30 to 45 minutes outside of DC. Our global office is in Stockholm, Sweden, which I've had the privilege of going there twice at this point. So we're right outside of Stockholm. And my current territory is all of North America, like I mentioned. So I'm specifically focused on human performance. So I work with military, I work with medical, which includes simulation environment, as well as sports, so athletes too.
Shelley?
So how do you move between these different types of people? What helps you to develop an understanding with each different kind of customer?
That's a really good question, because that's kind of why we've come to segment our company into where what we have segmented it. So we have our scientific research team that focuses more on the diagnostics of eye tracking. Then we have the marketing user experience research. And then we have the human performance. Actually, all of our teams involve a bunch of different applications. So for the scientific research, you could be dealing with diagnosing autism at a younger age, or you could be dealing with concussion research. And so all of our segments do have a bunch of different applications, but since we've segmented into end goals, which is mine's human performance, I can really talk to them in that direction. The end goal is to make the human a better machine, whether it is a professional hockey player or if it is, medical simulation as a surgeon trying to use this device better. So I think that our company has done that smartly and segmented our groups in a very smart way.
So I wanted to know a little bit more about your fiscal year. Your fiscal year is January to December, is that correct? Mm-hmm. So your numbers are January to December. Before, we're only at March. We're having to deal with the pandemic. I know that you haven't been furloughed, that you're still working. How do you think this transition from being able to travel and see your clients, up close and personal, to working from out of your home office, how is that going to impact your numbers this year?
I'd like to say that it won't, but I know it's going to, and we're kind of all preparing for that. I have already had come to terms in January that I was going to be traveling probably 40% more than I did last year because of my clients. They need to be face-to-face. I need to put my eye tracking technology on a hockey player as they're on the ice, or they just don't get the technology. So for me not to go face-to-face with a lot of these customers, it's going to be hard to sell to them. Everybody is kind of in the same situation, though. I think that's kind of where we benefit from this, is that we all understand. If my dog starts barking in my meeting, they have their kids in the background. So we all are kind of being very understanding of this. And I think that what it's doing is allowing people to be more flexible with some of these meetings, because they still need this type of research in their industry. And they're willing to kind of bend some of the rules and the norms in order to get what they need in order for them to buy, if that makes sense.
So again, how do you feel this is going to impact not only your personal objectives, goals, and objectives? How do you think it's going to impact the company, and how do you think the company is going to respond?
I was trying to avoid that specific question of the number.
Well, you don't have to be specific, just roughly,
No, I think that it will affect our numbers negatively. And I think that you would be naive not to think that if any sales position, because we are all affected by this. No matter what you're selling, we're all affected by it. And so I think that it'll negatively affect my numbers. I think it'll negatively affect the North America numbers, and I think it'll negatively affect our global numbers. And that's just because we are a global company. We have a China office that had already taken the hits back in January. Fortunately, we, as North America team, are doing pretty well, but we're preparing for Q2 and Q3 to be a bit of a struggle. And then the other question out there is, how long will this last? Is it just going to be Q2, Q3, or pick up back in Q4, or going to be on a pause for the rest? Year or 2 years,
Shelley.
That answer it?
It did. Thank you. Very well, nicely done.
So how do you keep your mindset fresh and resilient when unexpected changes like the pandemic come your way and you have to completely change the way you had planned to do business this year? You had planned to do more and more traveling. That's been completely curtailed. So how do you manage your mind when it comes to things like that?
Yeah. I think that my sales structure my sales technique has kind of changed, actually. And I think all of ours as account managers for my company have. We are actually being much more cautious of who we're reaching out to. We understand, people are losing their jobs that we're selling to, or people are completely worried about something else. I mean, I work with hospital systems, so I haven't even reached out to hospitals right now because I know they have something else on their mind. So I have pulled back actually a little bit, but you also just have to keep on trucking, and you have to understand, we've all gotten those emails of from any of our people that we've bought from before saying like, we are on this COVID-19 case. So I think that everybody understands that business kind of has to go on. It's just going to go on as unusually. And for me, I think that once we get to start traveling again, I'm going to be back out there. But for right now, I'm going to try to make these online demonstrations and these online calls work as much as possible.
So we've been over time, especially in the information technology industry, been provided all these tools that enable us to project out to our clients, to our customers. And tell me a little bit about how you're doing this. What tools you're using to communicate with your customers, to conduct demonstrations, et cetera, because, you mentioned that you're more accustomed to being in a hockey rink with an ice hockey player who's wearing your glasses. How do you accommodate that kind of change now with the tools that you have in your, home office there?
Yeah. Well, we have a good marketing team that has kind of created some great presentations. I'm never a PowerPoint person, but we kind of had to go to PowerPoints a little bit more to show them the details of our technology, rather than having it there right on their face. And then as a company, we do use Teams. We don't use Zoom too much, but Teams is working out well for us. It's a Microsoft platform. And it's also great because people that aren't typically using Teams can easily still get into it, just like Zoom. And then internally, which also kind of creates this morale of sales and making sure that we're still communicating in a way that we need to. We're using Slack to talk to each other every day, and also using the video camera. So being prepared to be dressed up during those meetings if it turns on. Making sure that your background or wherever you are is kind of clean enough. I have some cool details back there, but being prepared for that video camera to come on, because the first couple of meetings that I did have at home, I wasn't prepared, and it's always awkward to have a meeting when you have somebody on the video camera and then you're not on it. So that's another way to go about doing it. And that's also allowing them to be a little bit more personal with you, rather than just a phone call.
Shelley?
So there's a huge difference between being with somebody in person and having to have that screen in between you, and being in different places, being remote. So what are some of the communication techniques that you need to employ now that will help you to make that connection, since you're not in person with those people?
One thing is the video camera. I would suggest it if you're too afraid to use it. Suck it up is my biggest thing. Get a good camera angle that you can do. I actually have an external video camera, which really helps because my laptop one is at a terrible angle down below. So I do use an external one. Making sure that you're in an area where you can focus. You might not have the luxury of having a room to yourself, but making sure that you do have at least space. And also being prepared for anything during that meeting. So I was in one meeting yesterday where I just quickly hooked up something else so this customer could see it to my computer, which I actually probably wouldn't have been able to do if I was right there on site for him. But I was able to show him this demonstration because I already had it on my computer and it was right there in front of me. So kind of just being prepared for anything. And I go back to the point where everybody's in this situation. So don't be afraid to mess up on it, or if your dog's barking in the background, because they're all at home with their kids or their pets or their spouses as well.
That's kind of an interesting thing to notice. I hadn't thought about that. So you have the benefit of having moved, not only changed fields, which I think for you was a dramatic decision, but you've also had the benefit of working on the marketing side and then the sales side. What lessons have you learned having worked in both of those fields?
Knowing your product is probably the most important part of being a salesperson and also being a marketing person. So the moment that I stepped into the sales position at Toby Pro, I took as much information as I could inside my brain to understand our product because I wanted to be able to market it properly, which then led me to sell the products better. So I think that they kind of helped me out knowing both options. Now being on the account management side and having this marketing team to support me, I feel like I can directly go to them and say, this is what I need from you guys. And I feel like maybe I have some higher expectations because I know what they can accomplish too, because I've been there. And maybe some other account managers wouldn't feel comfortable asking them for that information because they haven't been on that side yet.
Let me do a follow-on, and then I'll hand it over to you, Shelley. So in my experience, there always seems to be a little bit of friction between marketing and sales. Marketing sees it one way, sales sees it the other. Based on the conversations I've had with you, you don't feel that friction, or you don't experience that friction either when you were on the marketing side or the sales side. What do you think is different about the perspective that you have of that, so that you've avoided the friction?
There's definitely friction there between the departments because you're right. Sales wants it one way. Marketing says we can't do it that way, or this is how we have to do it, or give me more, money for these shows because these are the shows that we want to attend or exhibit at. So there's definitely friction there. I think maybe I'm just better at going through that friction because I can see both sides. And people that haven't been on either the marketing side or the account management side can't see that because they haven't seen both sides. It's just their way or the highway.
Been there. Shelley?
So what's coming up for Toby in the future? what's next for you?
Toby or the Toby Pro side?
You.
Both, actually. That's a good...
Toby
let's talk
at
about,
Toby.
Yeah.
Okay. So I am one of two on the human performance team. So we are actually the smallest team within the segment. We actually don't have the segment in all of our global offices either. So right now I'm focusing on just making this segment succeed because it's new this year in 2020. As I mentioned before, I jumped on this opportunity when they said we were making this a segment because I love sports and it intrigues me. So my goal is to hit goal this year, really. And I actually had told my boss in the beginning of this year, that's all I want my goal to be this year. I've always had such bigger goals, but this year I just want to hit our number. And then in January, I actually thought it was going to be not too difficult, but now I understand it's going to be a little bit more of a struggle. So I think that's a reasonable goal to have.
So
talk to me in 5 years. Maybe I'll be way away.
Just
I'll
make
have
it
bigger dreams.
No, making goal in this year is a pretty good sized dream, actually. So if you're just hoping to make goal, I know it sounds funny for a sales professional to say, I just want to make the number this year. I'll be happy with that. That's very different from where you've been in the past. We've had conversations about you consistently setting and exceeding goals. How does that, how do you wake up every morning still motivated to move forward and be excited about what you're doing when you know it's going to be in your home office? What is it that motivates you every day?
Those POs coming in. No, I'm just kidding. That's a big motivator. It's back to sales. If you're not motivated by hitting that number, then you should not be in sales. That's what I always tell people. Yeah. And Erica, our sister, she doesn't have that motivation. She'll say that straight up that she doesn't have the motivation to wake up and hit that number. So that's why she's not in sales. But back to me. I think that is probably the number one reason why I wake up and continue working is to hit that number. But then also it's fun. It's fun hearing about these different applications. It's fun hearing that our, glasses have been used in aircraft that can go to 9Gs. It's really interesting to hear all these people doing research with eye tracking, and waking up every day to sell to these interesting researchers and these great minds that want to do great things with eye tracking is a motivator for sure.
So I should tell you that Toby Renée's sister, Erica, is also in the high-tech world. She works for a company that installs Salesforce.com in law firms, and she's on the consulting side, right? She doesn't have to sell. And then she has another sister that's on the marketing side. So we cover the spectrum with the three East Coast girls. Shelley, any more questions?
So how is it going being at home with Francis? He's also in sales. And is he still able to work online as well? And what's going on there in the home?
Yeah. So no, he's not able to work because his job does entail him to be in the office selling face-to-face. And the people that he sells to are actually traveling people. So when people aren't traveling, he cannot sell. So he is home for the foreseeable future. And we're fortunate that they are still paying him, which is great. So he's kind of on a little vacation right now. But we're also fortunate to have a 3-story home. So he kind of stays down in the basement. I do have my own little office space / workout room here. So we have space during the workday. I've kind of made it a routine to, grab my coffee, come up to the office. I do keep the door open just so I can continue to talk to people, and then I'll have my breaks throughout the day. So I've really started enjoying it. The first week was kind of difficult to find that routine, but now I've gotten a lot better, and it's been nice.
So there's a lot of people going through this. A lot of Americans are having to deal with this unexpected situation, for lack of a better way to describe it. But I'm interested in especially your age group. As I said, your generation has had to deal with several of these things. Not that previous generations didn't have their own to deal with. Certainly I did in my generation, Shelley and hers. What would you tell the people in your generation, and perhaps even share some of the conversations that you're having with your friends, some of whom I know work in the high-tech industry, work in the Washington area? What kind of things are you guys telling each other to keep your spirits up?
Well, this time it's different. So we are in North Virginia. We're right outside of D.C. Everybody kind of knows we've been in this bubble. Even during the recession time, we still were kind of in this protective bubble where it didn't hit us as much. But this is hitting everybody. So I think we're all just being cautious. And it was a shock. I think the big shock was hearing Marriott for a lot of people, because a lot of people work here in the area, work at Marriott because their headquarters is in Bethesda. So hearing that information, like a big company like that furloughing for 60 to 90 days, and just being prepared for that. None of my close friends have kids, but I do know people that are just a couple years older that do have kids. And that brings a whole nother element to it of having kids at home too. So you're just kind of being cautious right now until we get word that, this is gone completely, which nobody knows when it will be. So, I think we're kind of all just making sure that our companies are reassuring us right now.
Shelley, last thoughts before we wrap up?
So do you have any advice for people who are making a transition from working out in the field, traveling, to having to now stay at home to work out of the home? What would you advise them?
Be patient with everybody would be my number one thing. You don't know where anybody else is in this situation. If whether you're selling to them or just communicating with them in a way, you don't know if they have families being affected by Corona by actually getting sick, or if they're getting laid off or furloughed. So you don't know. You also don't know their home situation too. So maybe one parent's working one day, the next day, the next parent's working. So being as flexible with your meetings is really important as well. Maybe you have to work a little bit later to make sure that you're getting in their time schedule too. The next thing is finding that space, that comfortable space, whether it's the kitchen table being completely cleaned off for the workday and staying focused, or an office. And then having the right technology. So Wi-Fi, of course, is really important because they do say that try not to be on your cell phone because you might lose connection a little bit more. Being powered into a Wi-Fi or a hard line, having a camera and having a good microphone. I would say those are some pretty important things too. And then find your schedule. If you need to go out for your lunch break, go for a 30-minute walk. Get your coffee in the morning. Have your afternoon snack like you did in the office. But make sure you come back to that workspace.
It also looks like you spend some time working on your lighting. Is that true, or that's just good fortune in your case?
No, this is my office. I have a lamp on my left and a lamp on my right.
Yeah, well, that's kind of good lighting right there.
Thank you.
Any last words to the audience before we go, Shelley?
Just want to say thank you for showing up today for our very first interview on Sales Leaders Institute. We're very excited and happy that Toby Renée could be with us today to get us kicked off with a great big bang. And thank you all.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Toby Renée, I'm glad we asked you to do this interview. As usual, you exceeded my expectations. It was very informative, and I very much appreciate the way that you think, probably because it's a lot like the way that I think, I guess. So thanks for joining us today. Shelley, say your goodbyes.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for being here today. And for Sales Leaders Institute, I'm Shelley Carney.
And I'm Toby Younis. Thanks for joining us today. We hope you found this entertaining, informative, and educational. And we'll see you again on Friday.